Gilbert was basically a comedian in his time. He was a British playwright and humorist who was very highly respected at his time, and he collaborated with Sullivan a lot. The Mikado was actually the most popular of Gilbert and Sullivan's collaborations. Remember, this is the opera that was so influential at the time that one of the characters, Pooh-Bah, became a noun in the dictionary. It's incredibly witty and uses humor to kind of poke fun at the politics of Victorian England and just generally makes fun of human society and behaviors. According to Carolyn Williams, author of Gilbert and Sullivan, Gender, Genre, and Parody, it is a serious kind of parody. In every performance, Gilbert and Sullivan are doing something, and a lot of times doing lots of things, to parody gender roles and behaviors, other social norms, governmental activity, prior genres, and in one case, imperialism. The Mikado takes place in a fanciful version of Japanese society, specifically in a town called Titipu. The wandering minstrel, Nanki-Poo, has fallen in love with a beautiful young woman named Yum Yum, who is, unfortunately, the ward of Koko, the Lord High Executioner. Will Nanki-Poo be able to marry Yum Yum? Or will he be executed? Whichever way it goes, will his secret be found out? So, the main character, Nanki-Poo, he's a wandering minstrel. He's not rich. Apparently he's not all that good at playing music, if you ask Yum Yum. But she loves him just as much as he loves her. And they would love to be together. But the situation may be that they can't. But Nanki-Poo loves and trusts her so much that he tells her his secret. That he is the son of the Mikado who had run away from home. Now, apparently Nanki-Poo actually ran away from home because he was going to be forced to marry this older, ugly woman named Katasha. Now, Katasha, she's one of my favorite characters in this show. She is very fun to watch. But I would not want to be her friend, much less marry her. There's a lot of ugliness inside that I'm more concerned about. But regardless, she is very entertaining to watch on stage. Then there's Yum Yum. She's kind of the stereotypical sweet, gentle ingenue, meaning she's the sweet, innocent, young love interest. She's still a very sweet character. Just, not my favorite. She's still very sweet. Then you have Koko. Different actors will play him a little bit differently, but overall he's generally a bit of a goof. He's still trying to figure himself out. He was a tailor. He was just a normal guy who got in trouble for, I think it was flirting. And then, because of that, he was supposed to be executed, but for whatever reason, a series of events happened, and he somehow ended up becoming the Lord High Executioner. But he doesn't really want to actually kill anyone. He doesn't even really know how to do it. He's just kind of faking it.
Very well then. Behead me.
Well, now?
Certainly at once.
Chop it off! Chop it off! My good sir, I don't go around prepared to execute gentlemen at a moment's notice. Oh, I haven't even killed a sparrow. Still,
And then you've got Pooh-Bah. Pooh-Bah is my absolute favorite. Honestly, he is an absolute goofy buffoon of a man who has all these different positions of power, all these different places in office, but he acts all humble about it. He's like, oh, if I must take on this responsibility, I will. I am humble, I am a servant, I am just like one of you. If I must take the burden, if I must carry the burden of all these political positions and take the wages owed.
Logical Mikado. Seeing no moral difference between the dignified judge who condemns a criminal today and the industrious mechanic who carries out the sentence, has rolled the two offices into one, and every judge is now his own executioner. Chop, chop. Brilliant concept, n'est-ce pas?
Oh, but how good of you, for I can see that you are a nobleman of the highest rank, to condescend to tell all this to me, a mere strolling minstrel.
Don't mention it.
Honestly, these names are bad. Just awful. I love this story. The characters are funny, but the names do make me cringe. I mean, this opera was so influential that Pooh-Bah became an actual word in the English dictionary, though. It's clearly been influential in its own way. Is there a way that this operetta could be saved and continue to be performed even as we're, learning more as a society, correcting past behaviors? Because obviously we should not be making fun of other societies that are not our own. But again, that really wasn't the point of this opera. They weren't trying to actually make fun of Japan. They just used Japan as a convenient way to distance the story from the actual government that they were making fun of. England. Now, despite its influence, productions of this opera have deservingly been criticized for promoting stereotypes of East Asians. This is made even worse by the fact that the characters are often played by white people wearing heavy makeup to look Asian and traditional Japanese clothing. Is it possible to preserve this opera while removing the horribly racist aspects of this story? I mean, it really wouldn't be enough to exclusively cast Japanese singers, because this isn't a Japanese story. It's not meant to be. There's nothing in here that would speak to an inherently Japanese audience unless, whoever decided to perform it in Japan maybe had written in jokes specifically for Japanese people. But this story is very much meant for English people, possibly people throughout the British Empire, but again, mostly just making fun of the government in England. This really isn't meant to be a Japanese story. Anything Japanese in this opera is purely surface level. So that begs the question, would it be best to completely change the setting from Japan, but otherwise leave the story the same? I mean, this could be done. Operettas change their settings all the time. However, I would still be hesitant to remove all Japanese, influences from this show. I mean, you don't get to see very much of Japan in opera because it's a very white, very European music form. And I think it's very worthwhile to try and showcase some traditions from other cultures, whether it just be the clothing or the hairstyles, as long as it's done tastefully. I think it brings a little bit of diversity to the stage, because you can't just tell stories about white people and just constantly cast white people. That doesn't really help the issue either. Any Asian representation in opera is pretty rare. I'd rather just clean up the shows a little bit so that Japanese singers can perform in the show without feeling stereotyped. Diversity in opera has improved over recent years, and there's still room for improvement. The sets and costumes that are inspired by Japanese clothing and architecture are honestly beautiful. It would be interesting to see the story told in a different setting, but I don't think it's necessary to completely remove all Japanese aesthetics from the opera. For example, I'll talk about the performance of Three Little Maids. This song in the Stratford performance is stunning. The colorful kimonos that the schoolgirls wear are incredibly beautiful. There aren't many opportunities in opera to showcase the beauty of traditional clothing from countries outside of Europe. It's quite wonderful to see on stage. Now, the English opera, they decided to remove all Japanese aesthetics, and the songs are still the same, but if you look here, comparing the Stratford performance to this one, where 3 opera singers are wearing standard English schoolgirl uniforms, I don't know, I'm not really a fan. It just looks bland. My favorite way that I've seen this handled comes from Opera Australia's 2011 production. It combines the silhouette of a Japanese kimono while including aspects of English schoolgirl uniforms. It creates such a fun atmosphere with a setting that doesn't feel just like Japan, and it doesn't just feel like England. It really feels more like a fictional place that was inspired by 2 different cultures from the real world without anything being a one-to-one comparison. It's not Japan, it's not England, it feels like a whole different place. I've always enjoyed seeing art, music, clothing, food from different cultures blending together and creating something new, something unique. By combining cultural clothing and set design, it feels like this new fantasy world rather than like it's pretending to be a one-to-one example of Japan. Creating a new culture for the performance that is reminiscent of both Great Britain and Japan might be enough to bring this opera to the modern world. Now, this was the very first opera I saw. If you find this interesting, please feel free to go maybe buy a copy of it, or if you can find it being performed somewhere near you, give it a try. It's honestly a very funny opera, and it's a really good one to introduce someone who maybe hasn't gone to operas before, just to kind of get a taste for it. It's so different, it's so unique, and honestly, it even entertained me as a child. And let me tell you, most small children are not going to be easily entertained when they're watching an opera. This one managed to do it. Now, if the Mikado just doesn't sound right for you, there's another fun introductory operetta called L'Enfant et le Sortilège, an opera for children. The German translation that I watched was called Das Kind und die Zauberdinge, basically meaning the boy and the magic things.
Es ist auf jeden Fall eine Art Coming-of-Age-Story für ein Kind, was in einer Welt voller Objekte seinen Platz sucht eigentlich und draußen merkt, dass es nicht alleine ist.
I watched this in German while I was in Austria. I only understood some of it since there were no English subtitles, but I still had a lot of fun. And the children in the audience who actually speak German, they especially loved it. They were laughing and responding to the performers, really enjoying themselves. Now going ahead, I'll include links to the videos that I used below. Feel free to go take a look, or if you want to, see if you can find somewhere to buy a copy of a recording, or if you can find it somewhere. Go see it, see what they do. It's always fun to see what spin a certain opera house is going to put on an operetta, because it's always different.
Nothing could be more satisfactory.
Until next time, I hope I see you at the opera. Bye-bye.
Oh, he's gone and married Yum Yum. Yum Yum. Your anger very merry, for all will be merry. We think you had better succumb. Yum Yum. And join our excursions on free.
On this subject I pray you be dumb. Dumb dumb. Your notions, though many, are not worth a penny. The word for your guidance is mum.